sick millionaire asked the nurse to pretend to be his daughter for a day. Hours later, he was completely astonished when his wife entered the room with a lawyer and the will. Gianna was sitting at the small table in her kitchen, surrounded by bills and job advertisements. She sighed deeply, feeling the weight of loneliness and responsibility. She was a 28-year-old nurse with an aura of determination that did not match her physical fragility. Her light brown hair and green eyes revealed a watchful and caring personality. She had been raised in an orphanage, entirely alone with no family. Gianna depended entirely on herself. "I need to find a job soon," she murmured to herself, running her fingers through the ads. It had been a few days since she started feeling dizzy, and her body seemed increasingly fragile. Without money for her medical treatment, she needed to find a job quickly. As if her prayers had finally been answered, her phone rang. The device indicated it was an unknown number. Gianna answered, driven by the hope that it might be a response to the countless resumes she had sent out. On the other end of the line, a female and authoritative voice responded, "Good afternoon, my name is Carly. I am looking for a nurse to care for my husband. Your name was recommended to us." It had been a long time since she had found any nurse positions, accepting any job she could find. "I don't remember applying for this position. However, I am very interested in working as a caregiver," she argued, trying not to seem as desperate as she felt inside. "It was my husband, Mr. Gregg, who heard about your services. We urgently need someone with your experience," explained Carly, interrupting Gianna. "Can you come to the mansion today for an interview?" Not believing her luck, Gianna quickly agreed. "Yes, of course, I will be there." Upon arriving at the imposing Gregg mansion, Gianna was greeted by Carly, a woman with a rigid posture and a calculated expression. During the interview, the woman did not seem genuinely concerned about her husband's health. "Mr. Gregg was diagnosed with a rare disease. The doctors say he has only a few months to live. I believe these medical professionals exaggerate. It is not so worrying." Gianna felt a pang of compassion for the man, but she did not like the way Mrs. Carly spoke about her husband, almost as if his life did not matter. "I'm sorry to hear that. I would like to meet Mr. Gregg, if possible," she said, trembling at the thought that the wife might harm the man. Maybe she is not so bad, Gianna hoped, wishing it to be true. Before they could proceed, a man in gardening clothes entered the room by mistake, interrupting the conversation. Upon seeing the man, Carly reacted with evident disdain. "Don't you have eyes? Get out of here immediately." The gardener seemed embarrassed, and his shoulders slumped under the reprimand. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carly, it will not happen again," he apologized, noticing Gianna's worried look. "Forgive me for interrupting." Gianna felt uncomfortable with the situation and gave a look of pity to the man, but remained focused on her purpose of seeing Mr. Gregg's situation, fearing that the wife might mistreat him and no one would know. "Please, I think it's important to see Mr. Gregg before anything else." Taken to Mr. Gregg's room, Gianna barely had time to introduce herself when she noticed something wrong. They found the patient in bed, coughing violently, struggling for air. His face was completely pale, straining to breathe. Gianna ran to him, adjusting his position to ease his breathing and giving him gentle pats on the back. "He is not breathing," she murmured, taking charge of the situation. Carefully, Gianna turned him a bit more, fearing he might lose his life. She began to perform chest compressions until the man started breathing again, gasping. Gianna felt grateful for arriving in time and sighed in relief for entering the room before the worst happened. "Are you okay now?" Gianna asked, concerned after the crisis had passed. Mr. Gregg, still gasping, managed to smile weakly in gratitude. "You have angel hands, thank you," he replied, his voice weak. The man had a pale face and seemed too thin, almost as if he was not being cared for properly. "I am fine now," he whispered. His green eyes seemed to pay attention to everything about Gianna, moved by having his life saved. "He's so thin. Are they not feeding him properly?" she thought, feeling bad for thinking so poorly of the man's wife. "I'm glad you are okay, Mr. Gregg," she replied to him, giving him a smile. Carly, observing the scene from the door, was visibly uncomfortable. "It seems you did something good, Gianna," she argued, though her voice sounded as if she wanted the worst to happen to her husband. "However, I believe I can take care of my husband alone. He is improving. It was just an accident," she argued, dismissing Gianna. "I want her to be my nurse. I still have a voice in this house," argued Mr. Greg, livid at his wife's attitude. "Gianna, I want you to accept the job. You saved my life." Gianna, though relieved to have helped, felt the weight of the situation. "I will do my best for Mr. Greg," she replied, looking at the man's wife. "If you do not mind, I would like a full-time position due to his health condition. If there is any room, even a small place where I can stay to take care of him, even this armchair is enough for me," she argued, worried about the respiratory arrest as much as about the man's wife. "Stay as long as you want," the man argued, grateful, looking at her once more before turning to his wife. "Carly, accommodate her in our best guest room." "It is the least I can do to thank her for what she did," he ordered. Weeks later, Gianna was already accustomed to her routine with Mr. Greg. However, with each passing day, she felt increasingly weak and sick. "I need to get more money to go to the doctor. Maybe if I find some work on my days off," she thought, but she could never leave Mr. Greg, fearing he would worsen in her absence. "I will take care of myself as soon as he gets better," she decided. As she moved through the corridors of the vast and imposing mansion, carrying a tray of vital medications for the patient and the papers with the medical instructions, she followed the instructions rigorously, but Mr. Greg seemed to get worse each day, just like Gianna. It was in him that she found the strength to continue. "He needs me," she murmured to herself as she climbed the stairs with difficulty. Entering the spacious room of the magnate, she found him finishing a call, his voice as fragile as the breath of the wind. As soon as he hung up the phone, he fixed his green eyes on her, a gleam of urgency emerging amid his weakness. The call seemed important because the man's eyes were very worried. "Gianna," he began to speak as soon as he ended the call, his voice barely breaking the silence. "This might be my last day." The gravity of his words hung in the air, forewarning of farewell. Quickly, Gianna approached him, placing the tray of medications beside the bed while absorbing the weight of the moment. Mr. Greg then, with visible effort, said, "There is something very important that I need you to do." He paused, as if each breath was a precious commodity. Before Gianna could ask what he needed, her eyes shifted to the tray beside the bed, noticing the presence of an uncatalogued bottle among the usual medications, along with 2 envelopes that she assumed were of extreme importance. She knew all the documents and medications, aware that this was not there the previous day. Mrs. Carly used to leave all the prescriptions the doctor passed to treat Greg, and Gianna knew all the papers by heart. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, curious as she did not recall any change in the man's medications. Mr. Greg, following her gaze, hurried to respond. "This medication and these documents, they have a crucial role in what is to come. I asked a trusted friend to place them on the tray," Greg said with a weak voice. The nurse, driven by a mix of confusion and determination, found herself facing a dilemma. "Why? Is there something I can help with, Mr. Greg?" she asked, her voice loaded with a silent promise of loyalty. "Your health and happiness are all that matter to me." Since being in the mansion, Gianna felt increasingly close to the man, despite being able to talk little with him due to the amount of medication he took, which made him weak. She was grateful for having gotten the job, and especially for his kindness. Mr. Greg tried to extend his hand towards her, a gesture of gratitude and desperation, but weakness overcame him, leaving the movement unfinished. "Gianna, you have already brought light to my dark days, but there is something you can do for me. One last favor," he spoke, his voice choked with emotion. "Pretend to be my daughter. I don't want to leave without—" He stopped speaking, coughing again, leaving Gianna worried. "Please, I need you to pretend I am your father for a day. This is very important to me," he continued with a tense look. "Why are you asking me this, Mr. Greg?" she asked, not quite understanding the request. "You will be fine. I have faith you will get better," she argued, praying she was right. "Gianna, this is my last request. I have no more time, Mr. Greg said with a weak voice. Then the man started coughing violently again. Automatically, Gianna approached the man to care for him. "I will pretend. Defend Mr. Gregg. Or I mean, father," she joked, despite her heart being broken by the request. "He has no one but me," she thought, feeling more similar to the man than she would like. Before Greg could explain better the reason for the request or about the new medications, the door burst open abruptly. Carly, Mr. Gregg's wife, entered the room with determined steps. Behind her was a man extremely well-dressed, wearing a well-tailored suit. "It's time, Greg," Carly said. Her cutting voice interrupted any intimacy the previous moment had held. "I need you to sign the will. I brought a lawyer to attest everything," she argued rudely. Gianna, feeling the space contract with tension, stepped back, casting a last look filled with questions at Mr. Gregg. Was that why he asked me to pretend to be his daughter, so he wouldn't have to sign these documents, she thought. But before she could ask, Mr. Gregg started coughing even harder, his breathing becoming labored. Carly, with the coldness of someone playing a long, calculated game, turned her attention to Mr. Gregg, whose condition was deteriorating before her eyes. "Greg, you need to sign these papers now. It is crucial," she insisted, pushing the will towards him, the documents trembling slightly in her firm hands. Mr. Gregg, with a lucidity that defied his frail physical condition, gave Carly a look that carried a depth of understanding and resignation. "Carly, even now in my state, is this what matters most to you?" he managed to say after struggling to breathe. His voice was almost inaudible, a thread of sound laden with disappointment and sadness. Gianna began to feel a little dizzy. "I can't pass out now," she thought to herself. Turning to Mr. Gregg suddenly, the machines monitoring the patient's health started to emit alarming signals, making her worried. The constant beep that accompanied his heart rate became erratic, a frightening omen that something was terribly wrong. "What is happening?" Gianna exclaimed, the urgency clear in her voice as she tended to him, her own crisis momentarily forgotten. Carly, realizing the gravity of the situation, moved closer to Gregg and reaffirmed, "It doesn't matter. He needs to sign now," she pressured, ignoring the machine signaling an imminent disaster. Mr. Gregg, gathering what little strength he had left, tried to lift his hand to the document, but his consciousness began to falter, his eyes struggling to stay open. "Carly, he murmured, before his hand fell powerless, and his head drooped to the side, losing consciousness. Gianna rushed to get the resuscitation device if needed, with her nurse training taking over. "He is going into shock," she shouted, turning to Carly with a look that mixed plea and accusation. "This can wait. I need to help him now." But the damage was done. Carly's choices had pushed Mr. Gregg beyond a critical point, and Gianna found herself in the painful position of witnessing the consequences of those actions as she fought to stabilize Mr. Gregg's condition. One thought kept repeating in her mind, "I need to save him." Seeing the nurse's determination to save Gregg, Carly pushed Gianna's hands away from her husband, causing the resuscitation device to fall to the floor and break. "Get out of the room now. It was you who left him in this condition. He was fine before you arrived," Carly accused, pointing to the door. Despite Carly's harsh demands to leave the room, a greater force guided Gianna's actions, anchored in faith and desperation to save Mr. Gregg from a rapidly approaching end. "No, I need to do this." Gianna spoke more to herself, but loudly enough for Carly to hear. The determination in her voice was unshakable, even in the face of the emotional storm that Carly represented. He is dying, she thought, but she was unable to let the man go that way. With trembling hands, Gianna reached for the uncatalogued medication, a decision made in the height of despair. "Mr. Gregg, please stay with me," she softly pleaded, hoping that somehow her words would reach him, offering a beacon of hope in the twilight of his consciousness. Carly watched incredulous at the nurse's audacity. "What do you think you are doing? Get your hands off my husband now," she said, though loaded with authority. Her voice trembled with a hint of fear. Gianna, focused on her task, barely registered Carly's words, her attention entirely on the fragile thread of life that was Mr. Gregg. He was the owner of a large pharmaceutical institution. He should have requested the medication to give him a chance at life. Even with the fear of what she was doing in the height of despair to save the man, Gianna knew that administering that injection might be the only way to save him since his heart was nearly stopping. And that is exactly what she did. The administration of the medication was a moment suspended in time where each second seemed to stretch infinitely. Gianna watched Mr. Gregg anxiously, seeking any sign of improvement, any indication that her decision had not been in vain. However, what followed was not the miracle she had prayed for, but a visible worsening of his condition. His breathing, previously labored, became even more irregular, his face acquiring an even paler hue. "This cannot be happening," Gianna whispered to herself, the reality of the situation falling upon her like a heavy veil. "I just wanted to help," she said while pressing the emergency button. A few weeks earlier, Gianna had asked Mr. Gregg to install an emergency button in case his condition worsened. However, even in the face of her husband's worsening condition, Carly turned to Gianna with renewed fury. "You were not even able to save him before he signed the documents. That's enough. You've done enough. Get out of my house now," she ordered, inflexible, and for a moment, Gianna felt the weight of guilt crushing her. "I will ask the security to escort you to the door," Carly said, leaving the room with the lawyer in tow. Taking advantage of being alone with Mr. Gregg in the room, Gianna hid the papers he had shown her in her uniform pocket before the man's wife returned. "Hold on, I will find a way to help you," she said to the visibly distressed patient, as one of the security guards appeared, entering the room. As she was being escorted out by one of the house employees, Gianna's head spun, not just from the emotional turmoil, but also from a sudden dizziness that threatened to consume her. She stumbled, feeling that each step required immense effort. "Hurry up," the security guard muttered. "I just wanted to save him," Gianna thought before the security guard pushed her, causing her to fall on the mansion's driveway. She felt weak as the world seemed to spin around her. The security guard left her there as if she was unimportant and returned inside without giving her a second thought. After the tense confrontation with Carly and Mr. Gregg's health crisis, Gianna found herself weak and shaken, leaning on the grass to avoid fainting. At that moment of vulnerability, the house gardener appeared, offering his arm for support. "Are you all right?" His voice was gentle, contrasting with his rustic appearance. "I am fine. It is Mr. Gregg who has worsened," Gianna replied, recognizing the kindness in the man's eyes while leaning on the gardener to stand up. Gianna heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. The ambulance called in a hurry to attend to Mr. Gregg had finally arrived. The initial panic gave way to fierce determination. "I need to go to the hospital," she murmured more to herself than to the gardener. The idea of leaving Mr. Gregg alone in his most critical moment was unbearable. He has no one else. His wife does not care for him. Gianna knew that Carly would not allow her to go with the ambulance crew, so with slow steps, she walked to a taxi stand, fighting the dizziness and weakness that threatened to overwhelm her. Each step was difficult, but it had been weeks since Gianna started feeling ill, and now she had to go to Gregg and could not fall sick. She took a taxi, leaning back in the rear seat while trying to gather her strength. Her gaze fell on her uniform where she had hidden the unopened envelopes. "Please, my God, let there be something useful inside," she prayed, her voice filled with urgency. Moved by the will to save her patient, she broke the seal of the envelope. Inside, she found something unexpected. A positive paternity test, confirming the existence of an unknown son or daughter of Mr. Gregg, and a detailed report revealing that this person suffered from the same rare disease that now threatened the magnate's life. There was no name on the test, nothing that could indicate how Gianna could find Gregg's child. "Who could it be?" she murmured to herself, a growing unease invading her. Upon arriving at the hospital, Gianna ran to the reception, her breathing labored and her heart racing with the urgency of the situation. "I need to see one of the patients. His name is Gregg," she said with a voice laden with desperation. The receptionist, a woman with an imperturbable expression, looked at Gianna with a mix of sympathy and professional protocol. "I'm sorry, but only family members can see him at this time," she responded. maintaining the efficiency the situation demanded. Gianna hesitated, the moral dilemma hitting her hard. Remembering Mr. Gregg's last request to pretend to be his daughter, a risky decision took shape in her mind. With the paternity test still in her hand, she took a deep breath and lied. "I am his daughter. These papers prove it. I need to see him. It is urgent," she said, extending the document to prove her words, thankful that the test did not specify the descendant's gender. The receptionist examined the papers briefly before nodding, allowing Gianna access. "Please follow me," she said, leading Gianna down corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely. Walking behind the receptionist, Gianna felt each step like an echo of her own uncertainty. "Am I doing the right thing?" she questioned herself internally, the weight of the decision to lie pressing on her conscience. However, the desire to be by Mr. Gregg's side in his most critical moment, to fulfill her promise not to let him face the darkness alone, gave her strength. When she finally arrived at the room where Mr. Gregg was being treated, Gianna hesitated at the door, fearing what she might find. Taking a deep breath, she entered, confronted with the sight of the magnate connected to various machines, each beep a reminder of life's fragility. Gianna found Mr. Gregg lying in bed, intubated and looking fragile in the hospital bed. Beside him stood a doctor noting the patient's health status on his clipboard. Approaching slowly, with her heart aching from pain and guilt, the nurse could barely utter any words. "Mr. Gregg, it's me, Gianna. I came as soon as I could," she whispered, though knowing there would be no response. The coldness of her hand against his made her swallow hard, the magnate's words about pretending to be his daughter echoing in her mind. "I am his daughter. Can you tell me his health status?" she asked the doctor, who now looked at her attentively. Gianna hated having to lie again, but it was necessary. The doctor turned his gaze to Gianna, taking a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Gregg is in a deep coma. Given the circumstances, it is unlikely he will survive until the end of the day," he said, causing Gianna's world to collapse around her, each word from the doctor echoing in a void settling in her chest. In that moment, the reality of what between life and death meant became painfully clear. "He cannot leave this way," she thought to herself before turning to the doctor. "I need to be alone with him, with my father," she asked, approaching the bed where Mr. Gregg lay immobile, the sound of the machines filling the space between them. Once the doctor left, Gianna sat in the armchair beside the bed. "Mr. Gregg, I have not forgotten my promise," she began, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "I will fulfill your last wish as you asked. Today, I will be your daughter." Holding Gregg's hand, Gianna, through tears, said, "If we were father and daughter, we would spend a day at the beach without illnesses to afflict us, sharing stories and laughter. We would have a morning of strength and joy, ending the afternoon with coffee by the sea. This would be the day of our dreams." She finished speaking, her words filled with hope and sadness, offering comfort and a glimpse of happiness. Suddenly the room door opened abruptly, breaking the silence with Carly's sudden entrance. Her presence immediately filled the space with a cold and calculated energy, her eyes fixed on Gianna with evident disdain. "What do you think you are doing here?" Carly demanded, her cutting voice vibrating through the room's walls. "I thought I was clear, but it seems you have comprehension problems. You are fired, Gianna. I want you away from my husband." Despite the fatigue and weakness threatening to overtake her, Gianna stood to face Carly with determination. "You cannot fire me. I am his daughter," she lied, pulling the envelope with difficulty. Gianna knew it was dangerous to lie to Carly, but she had no other choice. Otherwise, she would have to leave the man alone with his wife who seemed to wish for his death. Carly was not surprised by the revelation or the blatant lie. In fact, she laughed with disdain, a harsh sound that seemed out of place in that environment of life and death. "You, his daughter? That is ridiculous. Look at you, your appearance, your clothes. You could never be part of our family," she spoke, seeming disgusted. Each word carried a contempt that made Gianna feel even smaller. But the nurse did not back down. "It does not matter what you think," she said, gathering the last of her strength. "I will stay here. He is not alone." The intense argument between the two women, was interrupted by the sudden arrival of the medical team, called by Carly. "This woman is disturbing the patient's peace. I demand that she be removed immediately," Carly ordered, pointing accusingly at Gianna. Trying to approach Greg, Gianna felt a strong dizziness and collapsed, murmuring her determination not to leave. As she fell, she saw Greg's fingers move, a sign of unexpected life. "He moved," she said with a weak voice as the doctors rushed to help her. Carly demanded that they ignore her. "This girl is nothing but a nuisance. She has no money to pay for her services," Carly said. Those were the last words Gianna heard before losing consciousness completely. Sometime later, Gianna woke up in a hospital room bathed in faint light. She felt urgency pulsing in her veins upon noticing the expensive hospital environment. "I cannot stay here. I cannot afford a hospital like this," she thought. With considerable effort, she ignored the dizziness and removed the IVs from her arms, determination overshadowing the pain. She tried to sit up, but her body protested, each muscle screaming in resistance. As she turned in bed, she saw her bag along with the envelope containing Mr. Gregg's tests on a chair. "Some nurse must have left my things here," she murmured weakly to herself. She needed to act, and every second lost was one less second Mr. Gregg had. Grabbing the envelope and her phone, she dialed the number of the Pharmaceutical Institute written on the paper with trembling hands. Her breathing became increasingly labored with anticipation. The call was answered quickly, and Gianna was promptly transferred to a pharmacist as soon as she mentioned Mr. Gregg's name. "Pharmaceutical Institute, Dr. Patrick speaking. How can I help?" said a man on the other end of the line. "Dr. Patrick, this is Gianna, Mr. Gregg's nurse. He fell ill and is hospitalized. I found your number in a test he did. I do not know what to do, but I need to help him," she said, feeling ill, but trying to keep her voice at an audible level. "Ah, Gianna, yes, I am aware of Mr. Gregg's situation. I need you to stay close to him. It is vitally important that he is not left alone now. We need to ensure he is safe. Can you do that?" he asked, increasing Gianna's concern. She tried to move from the bed, but her legs remained weak. "Tell me what is happening. I need to know what I can do," she argued, fearing that her absence had cost her patient's life. "Mr. Gregg is involved in a study for the cure of a rare disease, the same one that has left him ill. It is a revolutionary program, but it is still in its final testing phase. I hope the study results will be completed today so that I can proceed with the program. I know I will not have time to save Gregg, but I will still fight until the last second, Doctor," Patrick explained, his voice conveying the gravity of the situation. "I am going to the hospital to see him right now. Do not leave his side under any circumstances." He ended the call, hurried by concern. "Are these tests not related to that medication I administered to Mr. Gregg? If the medicine doesn't work and he doesn't survive because of me, I will never be able to forgive myself," Gianna thought, trembling. "I need to be there with him. I can't stay in this room," she concluded, struggling to stand up. Her legs burned, but she drew strength with each step, determined. Each step towards the corridor was arduous. Despite the weakness threatening to overtake her, her determination had never been stronger. "I'm coming, Mr. Gregg." "Hold on," she whispered to herself, walking as quickly as she could through the hospital corridors, carrying Mr. Gregg's documents. "Please God, keep me strong until I can reach Mr. Gregg before Dr. Patrick arrives, no matter what happens to me," Gianna prayed, shaking for the man's life. She kept walking, gathering strength to make it through the corridor. When she reached Mr. Gregg's room, Gianna was greeted by a scene of intense medical activity. Doctors and nurses surrounded the bed of the magnate, each one expressing urgency and concern through their actions and fragmented conversations. Through them, she learned that Gregg was in critical condition, and all the doctors seemed to be saying something worrisome. "We're going to lose this patient. There's no way to save him," said one of the doctors, causing Gianna's heart to sink. "What's happening?" Gianna managed to ask, her voice laden with anxiety as she approached, ignoring the weakness threatening to overwhelm her again. "He showed signs of improvement a few minutes ago, but now he's worse," explained one of the doctors, his voice lost amidst the cacophony of beeps and alerts from the monitors. "We're losing him." Gianna looked at Mr. Gregg, noting the pallor of his skin and the evident struggle in each breath. The sight reignited the desperation in her heart, the fear of losing someone who had become so important to her in such a short time. "Please do something," Gianna pleaded with the doctors, her voice choked with emotion. "Don't let him die." One of the doctors, the team leader, turned to Gianna, his serious expression denoting the gravity of the situation. Mr. Greg is in a very delicate condition. We're doing everything we can, but you need to understand—" "No," Gianna interrupted, the strength of her voice surprising everyone, including herself. "Don't tell me to understand. If there's any chance at all to save him, no matter how small, you have to try," she spoke, but her vision began to blur again. The doctor observed her for a moment, leaving Mr. Gregg and walking over to her. "We're trying, but we also need to take care of you. You're debilitated," he argued, but Gianna cut him off. "Forget about me. The most important thing is him. I could never forgive myself if something happened because of me," she argued, her vision blurring again. "You can't give up on him. There's always something more to be tried, always." The doctor took a step away from Gianna with the blood pressure monitor. "We understand your concern, but we have to be realistic about his chances," the doctor said, seeing her steady herself against the wall. Mr. Gregg was already aware of his health condition. "I'm sure he would want us to take care of you. His pharmaceutical institute is a well-known supplier, and I'm convinced he would understand the situation," he said. Gianna tried to take a step back, raising her hand to signal him to attend to Mr. Gregg. "Realism? He's not just a patient to me. Greg believed in me when no one else did, gave me a reason to keep fighting. How can I abandon him now?" "You can't abandon him now. You took an oath just like I did," she argued, feeling increasingly weak. However, the lack of medication began to take its toll, and Gianna felt her vision completely blur, an overwhelming weakness taking over her body. "Please save him," she murmured, her last words before feeling the ground rush up to meet her as darkness enveloped her once more. Days later, Gianna woke up in a hospital room. With difficulty, she slowly opened her eyelids, blinking against the bright light flooding an unfamiliar room. "Oh, where am I? What happened to Greg?" she thought to herself, recalling everything that had happened before she lost consciousness. Gianna knew a hospital environment well thanks to her skills as a nurse, and she knew this was not the same place where she left Greg. "They surely saw that I can't afford an admission to that hospital," she thought. No matter where she was, she knew she was better as her muscles no longer ached. Gianna could even get up with ease. She could feel her body differently from before. She felt strong, completely pain-free. So she pressed the call button to summon a doctor, looking around for any hospital staff. An elegant man entered the room and, seeing Gianna awake, broke into a huge smile. "Gianna, I'm glad you're awake. I'm Dr. Patrick," he said, approaching the bed. "I'm Mr. Gregg's trusted doctor and pharmacist. We spoke on the phone." "Mr. Gregg, how is he?" "I need to know," she asked, her voice full of concern. The man smiled reassuringly. "Everything will be explained soon. The attending doctor is on his way to see you." "Doctor," Patrick tried to calm her, but Gianna's anxiety only grew. "I have no way to thank you for everything you've done for my friend Greg. You sacrificed your health to ensure he was treated. People like you are rare, Gianna," Dr. Patrick praised. However, his speech was interrupted by the entrance of another doctor into the room. Gianna immediately began bombarding him with questions about Mr. Gregg's condition, but the doctor focused only on her. "You're in excellent health thanks to the medication," he said, checking the devices that indicated her heartbeats. "I can't afford treatment in this hospital," Gianna said, looking at the two of them. "I'm unemployed at the moment," she said, worried about her dismissal. Not knowing what had happened, she hoped Greg was well and had found another nurse to care for him with the same affection she had. Dr. Patrick reassured her, "Don't worry about the bills. The Institute will cover everything due to your exceptional care for Mr. Ross. Greg, and regarding your job, come. There's something you need to see once you're discharged." Curiosity gripped Gianna, but she didn't want to get her hopes up about finding a job so quickly, especially since Carly would hardly give her a letter of recommendation. I'll find a way to sort out the mess of my life." After some certification exams, Gianna was finally discharged from the hospital and accompanied by Dr. Patrick to Greg's mansion. "Did you bring me here to pick up my luggage?" Gianna asked Patrick before facing the house that had been a refuge for her in times of greatest need. "No, actually someone is waiting for you inside," Dr. Patrick said, smiling. "I'll be back later. I need to check on a program the Institute is working on." After thanking and saying goodbye, Gianna approached the mansion with a face full of anxiety. However, upon opening the living room door, she was in shock to see Greg standing, smiling at her. "I can't believe it," she said, her face full of joy. "Oh God, thank you," she prayed, incredulous at her patient in perfect health. "Tell me how this happened," she asked as Greg walked towards her. In all the months she worked for him, Gianna had never seen her patient walk, always confined to his bed due to the severity of his illness. "I can't believe what I'm seeing. You're walking," she rejoiced, waiting for him to come to her. Seeing that Greg was happy to be able to walk on his own, with quick steps he came to her and hugged her for a while, moved. "Gianna, you saved me more times than you can imagine, but there's more to our story than you know," he said, his voice strong and imposing. "I couldn't tell you everything. I'm sorry." Gianna took a step back, stunned by the seriousness in Greg's eyes. "Why does he seem nervous?" she thought to herself before smiling at him. "So tell me, I tried to understand everything that happened, but I have many questions. Who is your child? Did you manage to save them too?" Greg took a deep breath, his eyes emotional as he looked at Gianna. "Actually, I have a daughter," he said, moved. "I didn't know who she was until the day my health couldn't handle it anymore. It took a long time to get the test results, but yes, I saved her," he said, causing Gianna to let out a relieved sigh before smiling at him. "I'm glad to see her in front of me, healthy and smiling at me, daughter," he finished, causing shock to spread across Gianna's face. She couldn't hide her surprise, unable to believe what she was hearing. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice filled with emotion. "I think I didn't hear you correctly." Greg gave her a smile before saying, "You are my daughter, Gianna. My daughter." He was elated to say the words, taking Gianna into an embrace. "Me? How is this possible?" she asked, crying. "Are you referring to the request you made for me to pretend to be her?" Gianna asked, hoping it wasn't a joke as her greatest dream was to have a family. Greg smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You are my daughter, Gianna. I asked you to pretend because I thought I was going to die. I didn't want you to suffer to gain a father only to lose him immediately. I discovered that you spent your life in an orphanage, dreaming of finding your father. I couldn't reveal the truth the day I was dying, given the circumstances. I'm sorry for hiding it." Gianna struggled to process the revelation, each word from Greg, uncovering deep emotions she never knew she had. "And my mother?" she asked, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "What happened to her? How did you not know you were my father?" Greg lowered his gaze, indicating sadness at the thought. "Your mother, unfortunately, didn't love me. We were married, but she was never happy with me. She left without saying goodbye to live with another man. I didn't know that when she ran away she was pregnant with you. If I had known, Gianna, everything would have been different for us. She left you in an orphanage as soon as you were born, but her life didn't last long after that." He paused while Gianna began to cry. "I also wish everything had been different," Gianna said, saddened by her mother's story and by what had been taken from her. She had a father, a real father. With measured steps, Greg approached his daughter, taking her into a hug. "I will finally have a family. I must thank God every minute for the gift I received." He paused, but Gianna had many questions. "How did you find out?" Greg became serious due to the gravity of what he was about to say. "Carly, upon learning that I was ill, began to investigate to see if there was anyone with whom she would have to share my inheritance. However, she didn't tell me about your existence. But during a crisis, I went to get medicine and saw your photo. Immediately I knew you could be my daughter because you have your mother's face when she was your age. So I asked an investigator to find you, and when he found you, I still wasn't sure we were related. So I hired you because I was afraid you had the same illness and would be alone. Carly didn't want to hire you. Maybe because she feared I would discover the truth, and she hid everything from me. It took me a while to accept that she would do something like that, thinking she had lied to protect me if you weren't my daughter. But I saw she wanted you fired all the time, and I didn't allow her to do that. While waiting for the test results, I hadn't noticed that you were also ill because you hid your pain to take care of me. He paused, crying with emotion. Gianna looked at the floor, embarrassed. I didn't want you to worry about me, she said, ashamed. You are an angel in my life, Gianna, but I want to know everything about you. But back to what happened. I asked my medical team to find a cure to save you in case you got sick. So I asked them to find the cure before worrying about the paternity test, because it wasn't important. I already saw you as a daughter. I also saw you as family, Gianna said, smiling. I took care of him as if I knew he was my father, she thought, recalling all the days she cared for him with affection, happy to be useful to him. Greg's face turned serious as he revealed everything to his daughter. When the results came back, I no longer had time to tell you about the DNA without hurting you by dying immediately after. Besides, the tests revealed that Carly was drugging me to make me worse and inherit my fortune. Greg wiped away the tears, trying to compose himself before the shocking revelation. The discovery about Carly devastated me, but it reinforced my determination to protect you, my only true heir. Gianna, still processing the avalanche of information, felt a mixture of emotions, relieved at finally understanding her origins, but also anger and sadness at Carly's conspiracy. And now, what are we going to do about Carly? Greg looked at Gianna with determination, a flame of resolution in his eyes. Dr. Patrick took blood samples while I was recovering in the hospital, so we have proof of what Carly did. Her lawyers were all ready for me to sign the will, and for her to take my fortune. While you were in the hospital, she was arrested. Now justice has been served, and Carly will not go unpunished for her actions. But what about your illness? The cure you mentioned, is it definitive? Gianna asked anxiously. Ah, yes, the cure. Greg smiled slightly, a glimmer of hope crossing his face. Our medical team found the cure. The medication you gave me was being tested as part of that effort. Thank God it saved you. I knew that in my condition, there wouldn't be time for the cure to work, but by administering the medication to me, you saved me too. My daughter. We are cured, Gianna. We have a whole life ahead of us. Gianna felt a wave of relief and joy. That's incredible. So there's hope for both of us? She asked, smiling through her tears. Yes. I've already booked our tickets for when you leave the hospital, Greg replied, smiling at her. What? You could hear me while you were in a coma? Gianna asked emotionally. Yes, my daughter. I'll do everything to make sure we have our special day at the beach, and many more after that. Gianna nodded, gratitude and love shining in her eyes. Thank you, Dad, for everything, she said. Greg was moved to be called Dad for the first time. I'm the one who should be thanking you, my daughter. In the days following the emotional revelation in Greg's office, father and daughter worked together not only to strengthen their newly discovered family bond, but also to face the legal challenges posed by Carly. Justice prevailed, and Carly found herself behind bars, paying for her nefarious attempts to usurp Greg's inheritance and for endangering his health. Greg, with his health notably improved, thanks to the medical innovation his own company helped develop, fulfilled the promise he had made to Gianna. Father and daughter spent an unforgettable day at the beach, celebrating not only Greg's recovery, but also the new life they had ahead of them. It was a day of laughter, deep conversations, and future planning, marking the beginning of many other special moments they would share as father and daughter. Gianna, for her part, took on a new role at Greg's Pharmaceutical Institute. With her experience as a nurse, she began training other nurses to recognize signs of abuse in the family environment that went beyond physical marks. Gianna's teachings helped many professionals become more attentive and effective in identifying patients suffering in silence, transforming them into stronger advocates for the vulnerable. This new focus not only elevated the Institute's profile in the health field, but also positioned Gianna as a key figure in the fight against domestic abuse and neglect. Using her painful personal experience as a driving force for change, Greg, now more recovered and inspired by his daughter's resilience and compassion, dedicated a significant portion of the Institute's resources to support this cause, establishing awareness programs and partnerships with organizations dedicated to protecting patients' rights. Under the leadership of Gianna and Dr. Patrick, the Institute also began developing new policies to ensure patients received care in a safe and welcoming environment, setting a new standard of care across the sector. Gianna's work soon gained recognition beyond the Institute's walls, with invitations to speak at conferences and events on health and well-being, where she shared not only her professional findings, but also her personal story, touching many hearts and inspiring others to join her cause. As father and daughter, Gianna and Greg rebuilt their lives with mutual respect, admiration, and a love that overcame the trials of the past. They found joy in the little things, celebrating each victory together,